Hi everybody, welcome to Make a Believer Out of Me. My name is Jim Eliason. My cohort here is Sean Taylor. Today we have two guests, and I'll let them introduce themselves. Other than that, I'll give you their names. Kevin O'Connor, sitting on the...
Conover.
I'm sorry, Kevin Conover.
That's right, yeah.
Sitting on the far side, and Bill Hosch,
Right.
I believe.
Yeah.
And they are here to make a believer out of us. So I will let the two of you introduce yourself and give us a little background, and then we'll just move into a discussion.
Sure. Well, my name is Kevin Conover, and I'm a Christian, and I teach apologetics, which is a Greek word meaning defend, and I've been doing it for quite a while now. I got into that because my own faith was challenged and Christianity was challenged, and I wanted to look for answers that actually had evidence. I went to Point Loma High School, and there I had Muslim friends who were Jehovah's Witnesses, all kinds of different viewpoints. And so for me, it got to a point where I wanted to know, why do I believe what I believe? Is it actually based on evidence, or is this just one religion among many that I'm taken on blind faith? And so I got very involved in looking for the answers, and eventually I became very convinced that it was the truth and that it was the most plausible reality. And after having looked into this pretty thoroughly, I think none of us can be 100% sure about reality because we're finite, we're limited. But for me, in my experiences and the evidences I've seen, it's the most plausible reality. I teach it because I find it very interesting, and I also believe it's the opinions and the beliefs you have about reality are significant, and they affect your life on earth, aside from the obvious belief that it also affects your afterlife. In Christianity, the Bible teaches it obviously affects your afterlife. So that's significance for me. That's why I got interested in teaching it, because of that. I graduated from UCSD with a degree in psychology, and I also have a master's in divinity, and I am in a master's degree program in apologetics from Biola University, and that's a little bit about me. I'm married to and have 3 kids, so yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Bill?
Yeah, Bill Hosch. I got a bachelor's degree, University of Colorado, and a master's degree from the Institute for Creation Research and the graduate school there. And for me, I became a Christian about 25 years ago. I was working as a professional. My training's in geology. I was a professional in the petroleum industry. I know you can throw tomatoes at me if you want. Yeah, but anyway, it was fun work. Yeah, and it was there that I began asking questions to myself mainly. I didn't have enough courage to ask anyone else. What is the point of this life? What am I doing here? And is there any ultimate meaning? And why do I have these feelings of guilt and so on that seem to come up when I do things that are wrong, and things like that came home to roost for me personally, that were very big questions. And I met a family that shared with me the gospel in a way that wasn't just religious words, because I hated religion. To this day, I hate religion. I'm not interested in religion. Religion is what I would call as man's attempt to appease God or to reach up to God or something like that. What confronted me is that we're talking here about something that God did in history on man's behalf so that man could have a right relationship with God. And I thought, if there's any truth in that, if there's any truth in that at all, I've got to know. I just can't let that pass, And when I read that, I became very surprised later on that, leading scientists, leading thinkers, Isaac Newton, Robert Boyle, Johann Kepler, Pascal, Pasteur, Maxwell, Faraday, the greatest names of science were Bible-believing Christians. And for them, it wasn't just the religion of the day. It was, for them, it was the passion that drove their science. And so these were not drooling idiots, these people, including the leading geologists, the founders of geology, were creationists. And so that's a little bit on my background. I don't know how much to go.
Okay.
But I want to just commend you and thank you for allowing us to participate in a forum like this.
Sure.
Because I just love having a friendly discussion.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for coming.
Yeah.
And just so that we can make it clear for the ambulance driving by,
We planned this. This is all planned.
I would have just kept talking.
Normally he would too.
and any other viewer. But you both are Young-Earth Creationists, correct?
We are.
And if you can, please tell us a little bit about what exactly that means.
Well, I'll let you add to whatever I say, Bill.
Okay. Go for
A
it.
young Earth creationist is somebody who takes the Bible literally. Now, there are people who are old Earth creationists who, there's a difference of opinion here that some people will say, I'm an old Earth creationist, but I take the Bible literally. This is where there might be a little bit of conflict as to what literal is. But we look at the genealogies in Genesis, and we take it from Adam forward, and we base the age of the earth on the testimony, the historical record written in Genesis, and then say, okay, based on these genealogies, what we can see here is that the earth is approximately 6,000 years old. That's essentially what a young earth creationist is, as opposed to somebody who is an old earth creationist, and some of them who still believe in Adam and Eve and so forth, but they believe that God started creation much earlier. So they would potentially adhere to the 4.6 billion years the earth has been around, the 20 billion years, 15 to 20 billion years the universe has been around, and their view is that is not in contradiction to the scriptures, although I believe, speaking for both Bill and myself, that we would say that is in contradiction to the scriptures. Did you want to add something?
Sure, yeah. So, I can look at a young Earth time scale and ask myself the question. I'm a geologist. I've been trained in radioisotope dating, trained in, evolutionary thinking. I understand all that. I came out of that. And I say to myself, is there anything that's scientific nonsense about believing in a young Earth? I know superficially there's plenty of things. Superficially there's things that look absurd to most people. In fact, if you would have told me 25 years ago I'd be talking to, having a forum like this, defending young Earth creations, I would have said, what planet are you from? I would have, no way, But if you ask the question, what really, and investigate, where are the real rubs? Because I'm not interested in committing intellectual suicide, never have been. Where are the real rubs that say that you must have a universe and an Earth that's billions of years old? I don't see it.
So you mentioned that you are not interested in religion, and is that in any way different from your perspective, Kevin?
No, we're in very much agreement with that, and the discussion is religion, like he said, is man's attempt to reach God, and Jesus Christ is God reaching out to man, is how we distinguish it. And one of the glaring differences that I see is that oftentimes religion revolves around people trying to create rules that they think are going to make them good in the eyes of God. Whereas a relationship is that Christ has reached out and said, listen, I love you, I care about you, and all I want you to do is love me back. I'm not interested in you following a bunch of rules. What I'm interested in is a love relationship with you, meaning that your motivation for what you do is not based on don't do this, don't do that, do this, do that. It's based on, we have a relation, like my wife. Like, I don't do things for her because I got a checklist. Hopefully I don't, but, and got to buy roses today, got to take her on a date this week. Okay, did that. Okay, I'm good. What kind of a relationship is that? But in fact, hopefully my relationship with my wife is motivated out of a love for her because I care about her. And this is the difference, the glaring difference that I see between what I would call religion. Even within Christianity, there are people who are religious, but they've lost sight of what God is looking for, which is a relationship. I mean, the Bible literally says that God is love. All throughout the scriptures, there's a relational component that is very heavy, and I think that's what sometimes is missed, and it turns into these I got to follow the rules kind of thing. Yeah.
Okay, so I'm a little intrigued as to what, so do you not attend a specific church?
Go ahead, Bill.
Oh, I attend a church, sure. I do it of my own free will because I want to be around like-minded believers. And in fact, the Bible indicates that it's a good thing that I do. And so therefore I do it out of free will, not because I'm earning any points with God or anything.
But are these people that you would consider religious or non-religious? Are they different from you this way?
Well, most of the fellows that and people that I hang out with in a church setting are people who would agree just like we do, that religion is not the issue. Religion is not. Who cares about religion? That doesn't excite me. Never has.
How would you define religion exactly? It's a little confusing to me.
Yeah. Well, religion is a faith system. I think that you can be religious on all kinds of matters. I think that, frankly, and I mean no disrespect, that some of the atheists that I've met over the years have been among the most religious people I've ever met.
In what way?
In that they must believe that life arose from inorganic chemicals, in spite of the immense probability against it. And many scientists have agreed with me, who are not creationists by any means, that that's just a glaring example.
I guess what to clarify this a little bit, I guess being dogmatic to the point where a blind faith has taken over, and you've become almost in this rut, is what I would call religion. It's where it's a little bit hard to describe, but you know it when you see it. It's just this blind adherence to something almost without thinking, without being able to have a discussion. It's just these. I guess people would call it closed-mindedness, would be typical of quote-unquote religion or a religious person. Now, words are used in different ways throughout different times, so, what I'm characterizing as religion, somebody might say, oh, it's just a system of beliefs or whatever, but I guess what I'm very much opposed to is dogmatic adherence to the extent where what you think and you believe has not been thought through, meaning there's no really plausible reason behind what you think. It's just this adherence to something because you were brought up that way, it's what you've been taught all your life, on and on and on. And anybody can get there, right? I mean, whether you're an atheist or not, there are people who, I was talking to somebody the other day who said, an atheist who said, I said, so could you tell me what is the strongest, most convincing evidence for you that evolution, that the universe came from nothing is a fact? And the person's response was, I really don't have any evidence, but I trust Carl Sagan, or no, Stephen Hawking. I think she said, I trust Stephen Hawking. And I was kind of baffled because I was thinking to myself, wait, haven't you thought this through for yourself? And she said, well, it's not figured out yet, but Stephen Hawking is working on this, and whatever he says, I'll go with it. And I thought to myself, wow, that seems very religious to me. that hasn't been thought through. So I guess that's what I would say I would characterize as kind of a dogmatism religion. I hope and I believe that I've really thought through my beliefs. And I don't adhere to them because I've been raised that way, but because I have not found a more plausible kind of perspective on reality. But I'm always open to hearing. I love, and that's part of the reason I'm here, is I enjoy hearing people's viewpoints and finding out what people think and seeing if there are holes in what I believe, or if sharpening myself too, getting better at understanding what I think and believe and change. Yeah.
One thing I could add is, if you look at Jesus Christ, at least as he's portrayed in the New Testament, would you describe him as religious? I don't see how anybody could say that. He was not interested in founding a religion, I don't think. He was interested in a way for people, for sinners to, people who have moral guilt to be relieved of it and to find truth and life. I think that's the way, that's the kind of message he preached, and he made a lot of waves with the religious people. He didn't get along very well with them at the time.
Now, as you mentioned, as Young-Earth Creationists, you do take the Bible literally, as you said, and that is what has brought you guys to looking at, as you mentioned, the genealogy through the Bible, through the Old Testament, to find out how old the world is, and you feel that you've taken a good look at the scientific evidence, and you feel either it is lacking and/or you find evidence to match what you find in the genealogy in the Bible. Have you looked at any other holy texts, ancient texts? Have you studied the Quran? Have you studied the Bhagavad Gita? Have you studied these other texts? And what is it about the Bible, besides your upbringing? Is there anything else besides your upbringing that has brought you towards the Bible for this quote-unquote truth, if you will?
Sure.
As opposed to any other origin story,
You want me to
as
go
opposed
first?
to
You wanna go
evidence?
Well, one thing that comes to mind right away is that I can read in the Bible passages like, "Come, let us reason together. Though your sins are as scarlet, they shall be as white as wool. Though they're red as crimson, they shall be as wool." In other words, the God of the Bible is saying, "Come on, put your brain on. I want to talk to you about truth." It's not a blind leap. It's come on, use your brain a little bit and think this through. And I see that, and I see the word truth appearing a lot in the Bible. That is a word that draws me, And I don't see I haven't studied a lot of those books like you say. I certainly haven't. I know a little bit about them, but I don't see the same premium put on that word truth.
So you find things in the Bible that as it's written and as it is told that speak to you.
Yeah.
Would it be okay if I teach a class on world religions, so I cover a whole bunch of subjects. I'm what somebody might call a generalist. Bill, he knows tons, but his specialty is geology, but he probably knows more about plenty of subjects than I do. But I've read the Quran, I've read the Book of Mormon, I've read the Polycanon, I've read these different books, and from my perspective, there's distinct difference between, if you want to make the biggest contrast, it's the Book of Mormon and the Bible. The contrast is dramatic, and Mormons have and I'm pleased, any Mormons out there, don't take offense or anything, but my perspective is that with Mormonism, they have what's called a burning in the bosom, and it's basically a catch-all, meaning if something doesn't make sense, you abandon your mind and you focus on the feeling you get. And they say this signifies the truth. Well, we don't have something like that in Christianity. If the history recorded in the Bible is faulty, we have a real problem, because the history of the Bible is required in order to justify the message of the Bible.
Right.
You cannot have a need for a savior if Adam's sin did not bring sin into the world. So if Genesis is not true, you have a serious problem. If that's not true, then why have Christ? Why the need for somebody to pay for your sins? And so now I don't believe it because I need it. I believe it because, so I'll give you an example. In the Mormon book, much of the history, pretty much all of the history, is non-existent. You cannot go to any of the places they talk about in the Book of Mormon. You can't visit them. You can't find archaeological evidence. You can't find swords used by the Nephites or any of these things in North America or South America. Literally, they can't put maps in the Book of Mormon because the places that they state in them cannot be found. On the other hand, if we look at the Bible, it's much different. It talks about the Red Sea, Jerusalem, Egypt, just numerous places that it references that are actually there. You can go and you can visit them. For a long time, the Hittites, which are mentioned over 40 times in the Old Testament, archaeologists said, hey, the Bible's not true because this is nowhere in archaeology. But then they actually found the Hittite capital with numerous references to the Hittites. And so, in my examination of things, there's a glaring difference between the Quran, the Book of Mormon, and the Bible. They make different claims. Not only do they make different claims, but their accuracy as far as to what they record is, there's a wide spread between the Bible's accuracy and the accuracy of other books.
So part of what's compelling to you is the fact that the Bible talks about real people in real places.
Absolutely, that's a big deal to me. If the Bible, if they were looking and they couldn't find the places that are recorded in the Bible for like Nineveh, like they never found any evidence of King David, the stuff that's in there, they've been looking for it for a long time. If it wasn't found, it would make me have I would begin to really question the validity of the text. And that's why I'm not a Mormon, is what I'm trying to say. Yeah.
Oh, we're glad you're not.
Okay.
I think we'll all agree on that.
Yeah, I love Mormons, though. Please don't get me wrong. I think a lot of Mormons are awesome people.
My very best friend was Mormon.
Yeah.
If swords and chariots were found in, say, Missouri, dug up one day, would you pay a little more open attention to, say, the Book of Mormon?
Well, I think it would certainly turn my head. I'd be interested to know about it and to learn more about it, yeah.
Are you of the position that Noah's Ark has been found?
I don't think so. That's my opinion. I'm a little bit like the guy from Missouri, show me this thing, and I'll believe it, and a lot of the photographs, these kind of blurry photographs and eyewitness claims, they're just not quite convincing. I think if you're going to make an extraordinary claim, you got to have evidence to back it up.
So you don't necessarily trust an eyewitness claim?
I think multiple eyewitness claims are sometimes pretty reliable. Yeah.
What is your view on the multiple eyewitness claims of UFOs in, say, southern Texas?
Me personally, I have other reasons for not thinking UFOs are real, but I'm not dogmatic on it. Any area where there's this kind of gray, it's hard to say to somebody you didn't see a UFO. If they're like, I saw a UFO. And if you have multiple people saying that, I'm like, well, I guess they saw something. But I won't, it's not like I'm going to go out and argue for UFOs because it all, for me, my belief in Christianity, it's kind of multiple attestation from numerous angles. There's so many different things that have caused me to decide to believe in the Bible, that, UFOs, I just don't have that kind of evidence for UFOs. And it's also not something I feel is real important that I take the time to study and look into, I guess.
Now, you mentioned if there was not archaeological evidence of something that was stated in the Bible, a story told in the Bible, that it would give you pause.
Yeah.
Considering that there is not evidence of Noah's Ark, how does that shake you?
You want me to answer or you want Bill?
You had said that it would be difficult for you.
Yeah, I'd be happy to answer that. So for me, even though you can't find Noah's Ark specifically, I think if you look around, you begin to see evidence of a flood. So there are about 270 stories around the world recording some sort of a flood. You have the Chinese have their own thing where they discuss specifically a flood and survivors. You have the Red Record, that's Indians, actually, Native American Indians have their own recording of a flood. There's numerous records of a flood, so that's one piece of evidence. We also know, and I'm sure you're familiar with this, that all over the world there are actually marine fossils far inland. So in Colorado, there's a massive fossil graveyard, and what's weird about it is that you have land animals mixed with sea animals in Colorado. So we all have to deal with this, and we have to say, well, how the heck did they get there? In Chile, they recently found 80 whale fossils with 20 complete specimens in the desert, okay, more than a mile inland. And so whatever the case, whether we're looking at this from a long age perspective or not, we have to deal with that and say, how did that get there?
Right.
And so what's happened for me is over time, I've seen numerous amounts of evidence that have lined up to tell me, okay, I've come to the point where the flood looks extremely plausible to me.
Just to clarify something on that, you mentioned the different stories of the flood. Surely, I mean, obviously we understand that floods happen everywhere fairly often.
Yes.
So, I mean, obviously the account of floods everywhere is certainly not evidence that one particular flood covered everywhere at the same time.
Yeah, it doesn't automatically warrant...
Or like at all, I mean...
It doesn't warrant that conclusion automatically.
Certainly
but
not.
For me, when I look at the history of the Bible as it's recorded, I look at the consistent verification of places, findings. You know, recently they found the ossuary of the brother of Jesus. Now this is crazy, and I encourage you to look it up, because I think if I heard it just straight up, I'd be a little skeptical. But they recently found a bone box, which is what was often people were buried with, and on the side of it, it said, James, the brother of Jesus, son of Joseph. Well, when you get enough of these kinds of finds, you begin to think to yourself, hey, there's a pretty consistent track record of accurate recordings here. So when I begin to see flood stories all over planet Earth, and then I see in the Bible what looks like a historical record of this actual event, well, along with other things that I look at, for example, radioactive dating, radiocarbon dating, and these sorts of things, which that's a whole nother discussion in and of itself, but it begins to make me think, okay, there's good reason for me to think that this really happened.
How do you account for the very many miracles that would have had to have taken place in order for that flood story to actually be true?
I'm going to let Bill answer this one.
Well, it says there was a supernatural cause for the flood, for sure. And miracles such as, some of them can be answered. I don't know if I'm not sure what you mean by miracles, so I have to ask.
Well, a flood that would cover the entire earth would require a whole subset of miracles. For example, enough water to do the job,
Right.
which doesn't exist.
Okay.
That's one miracle that would have to happen.
Okay, well, perhaps I can answer that one. The ocean basins are far deeper than the continents are high. in this planet. This is the water planet. If you wanted to flood the Earth today, all you'd need to do would be to have an upheaval on the Pacific Ocean floor. Wouldn't take much of an upheaval either, and you could flood Mount Everest. No problem at all. Now, what's interesting to me is that people talk about, I remember reading a headline several years ago that when they were getting the Martian data in, that there was a headline in the paper that said, "Flood of biblical proportions that struck Mars." Well, on Mars, there isn't a drop of water to be found there currently.
Right.
Right?
Not liquid.
And yet they were not liquid, right?
Today.
Yeah, right. It was nothing like the Earth. It isn't even blue, it's a red planet.
Today, yes.
Yeah, right. And yet people are proposing a gigantic flood on Mars. What? Well, why were they doing that? On the basis of good evidence, right? And I think you've got better evidence on this planet for a global flood, if you think about it.
So, an upheaval in the Pacific that you're talking about
Right.
would have to be of such a magnitude that it would probably, by itself, destroy all the life on the planet. Why would you need the flood?
Well, need the waters to get up on those continents and to completely clean out all the land animals.
What about
and the people.
What about the marine life?
Okay. It says the judgment in particular in the text. It says that the animals that were judged were land-dwelling and air-breathing animals. So the whales and the porpoises
I
excluded.
apologize. Let me be a little more clear.
Right.
What about the marine life, the freshwater marine life, and the
yes.
saltwater marine
Okay.
life, when all of it is mixed together in one hot soup?
That's a really good question, yeah. These are good thinking questions, yeah.
Well, we do that.
There are
We
sorry.
Go ahead,
specialize in bothering people.
Well, there's a couple of conceivable explanations for that, right? I'll start with the radical one first. I'm not sure how much I buy it, but the radical one is very interesting. When there's big floods in the Mississippi River, like there have been, there's cycles when I think 10 or 15 years ago, the Mississippi River was churning out like twice its volume of, twice the discharge that it normally produces. And when it did, far out, there was a plume of fresh water that flowed out on top of the salt water as far south as the southern tip of Florida. You had marine organisms that are strictly freshwater organisms out there on a layer with saltwater organisms underneath. Is it okay? So what if you had, and this is a little bit imaginary, right? But what if you had a flood that really did drench the earth so that the runoff on all the continents was happening like this? Is it conceivable, at least, you could get density layering like this where the
With a supernatural miracle, no doubt.
No,
I mean,
no,
but I mean, no.
Well, I'll give you an answer.
Because there's layering in the oceans today
Certainly,
that are very distinct,
certainly.
and that's how the whales communicate. They bounce their echoes off of these layers, and they can communicate across ocean basins. Yep.
Surely. Now, given a tsunami crashing that area of layering, I think we're going to see a
A
different.
little too violent.
Yeah, I think we're going to find out that it's not so subtle layered like
maybe.
that. And I think that might be a bit of what was happening if this story were to be in any way.
I'll give you another.
Unimaginary.
It was the question was about saltwater versus freshwater. What was it exactly?
Oh, we have the existence today of
Freshwater fish living in saltwater.
Okay, so
There's so many differences between these different marine animals that would, of course, require.
So I would say that, just so we're clear, even though we're young-earth creationists, we agree with adaptation
Right.
and
That was the second one.
what we would term microevolution. And I know that generally evolutionists don't use this term because their viewpoint is that evolution, there is no distinction between macro and microevolution.
Correct.
So we make a distinction that we agree with adaptation. And so from a genetics...
I apologize for the viewers.
Yeah.
Go ahead and explain the difference between micro and macroevolution.
Okay, so generally speaking, macroevolution is change from one species to another. Now, I have to be careful about, I know, using the word species, one kind to another.
Yeah.
So it's, the word species is probably not quite appropriate.
Right.
It's more like, probably like what we would consider a family versus a species. But we don't agree that one kind of animal can change into another kind of animal. And the term kind is specifically used in the Bible. Now, that being the case, we do believe in genetic, that the genes contain the information to be able to make different kinds. And I think that most evolutionists would agree that, so if you have two dogs a long time ago, many different types of dogs can come from them. But on the other hand...
How would you
Yeah.
specifically define kinds, though?
An interfertile group of creatures that can produce a fertile offspring among themselves.
That's how
what we
species
call
is
it, kind.
defined.
Yeah.
Yes and no. We have domestic dogs, we have wolves, we have foxes, we have coyotes, all of them regarded as different species, yet they all can produce a fertile offspring. The fact is that foxes prefer to cross with other foxes and wolves with other wolves, and so therefore we call them species, because they're...
Well, there's two distinctions. Either they can, or either they can't or won't. If they cannot or will not, that's a different species.
Either one, either one, right. That's
Now-
the way I understand it too.
But a kind, okay, so basically what we're saying is that with the freshwater and your saltwater fish, your situation is that as we go back in history, you have, if we were to picture genetics, and correct me if I'm wrong, Bill, but if we were to picture genetics, the genetics of an organism, the farther back you go in history, the bigger the book. So the book is able to produce a wider variety of organisms, living creatures. Now, as we narrow down, right, if we get to a Chihuahua, it can't make a Great Dane. But if we were to go back far enough in history, we would have two dogs that would have the genetics to be able to make all the different varieties, including a Great Dane or a Chihuahua, ultimately.
Right.
And so,
this is also how you explain the other ark miracle, one of the other ark miracles that would be required, which was to...
I apologize.
so that's the explanation of the saltwater and the freshwater fish, is what I'm saying.
Right, what you're proposing is, obviously, I mean, we're talking about another miracle, because they would have to evolve, albeit on a micro level, in one day, or at least within a few hours before they can no longer breathe.
I don't know that that's the
No.
case.
That's
Sorry?
what he was, I don't think that's what he was saying.
How long was the flood?
The flood was, let's see, 40 days.
Right. And how
150
long will it
days.
take a saltwater fish to die in freshwater?
Okay, now...
Or vice versa?
Now, you know that there are
You're
multiple...
missing the point, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, the question is, you know, today we have saltwater species that are very intolerant of any freshwater, and we have freshwater species that are very intolerant of
Got it.
the
So
least amount of
all
salinity.
marine...
The question is not the duration, how long the
Got it.
flood lasted. The question is, how long did it take before we got these extremely
Got it.
intolerant species? Today we have salmon and shad and some other
Sure.
fish that are capable of going easy.
So the claim is all marine life at that time was tolerant of all temperatures and all salinity levels.
That's proposed as a suggestion.
Yeah, and we don't know...
We don't know.
We don't
I
know
know
the
that.
extreme,
Yeah.
like, I mean, could they live in the Dead Sea? I don't know. But we do know that they were more tolerant than they are today, and that they were able to produce a variety that would, you know, ultimately be able to...
How do you know that?
Oh, I'm not... When I say I know, sorry, I don't know. This is hypothesized as the solution to the problem.
Does anybody hypothesize that maybe they had fish on the boat?
No.
Why not?
The text says specifically
Yeah.
that only land animals were on the
Right,
boat.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
To get back to eyewitness testimony, if we could.
Sure.
eyewitness testimony, obviously, we know very well, not just scientifically, but intuitively for most of us, we know that eyewitness testimony is not exactly 100% reliable.
Oh, for sure.
Could be, in
Yeah.
fact, 0% reliable in many cases,
Oh, yeah.
in the case of, say, a lie or insanity. Number of variations there, or the telephone game, I tell you, you tell me, pretty soon,
Right.
it's not the same story.
Sure.
You mentioned maybe if there was a lot of people that said the same thing, that saw the same thing, we know of cases like UFO extraterrestrial rape, for instance. That's a very, very common eyewitness testimony. I think we can safely say it's not true. As a number of other things, number of other accounts. In the case of Jesus, is it your position that we do or do not have eyewitness testimony?
Well, I'd say this book has got eyewitness testimony.
Who was the eyewitness to Jesus?
Who?
What
Well,
author in the New Testament was an eyewitness to Jesus?
Peter and James and John and Matthew and other people who wrote about him. And not just people who are biblical authors, but there's nobody who would, no scholar of history that I know of who would deny that Jesus was a historic individual.
Even the Jesus Seminar, which is considered the most liberal, kind of skeptical people out there when it comes to looking at the Bible, don't deny that Jesus existed. They don't deny that he died. They don't deny any of those things.
Well, there certainly are historical scholars that have no reason to trust and will say that there is reasons why these stories would have been written, where the stories came from, and that this Jesus character did not exist. Now, Jesus obviously isn't the name that was used then. I mean, if we went back in time and called out Jesus, no one would turn around if he was there or not. But the name that was used then was a very common name. So there were certainly people at that time that existed with that name. Now, whether they made water into delicious, fun wine, that's a different story, obviously. Obviously, my question back to the eyewitness testimony is that the texts that we do have do not date. I mean, the closest we have is 40 years after the supposed death of the Jesus character in the Bible. Am I incorrect there?
That's probably about right.
I would
Yeah.
say that's probably. I think that recently there's been they think they've found one that's even more, but I have no reason.
But who
to
knows,
disagree
since
with
we
you.
don't trust with radiometric dating, right?
Well, they use more than just radiometric dating.
Tell me about other things.
Well, they look at the actual kind of paper that it was written on.
Certainly.
Right.
They look at the way it was written.
Certainly.
All kinds of different things. Don't misunderstand me. Radiocarbon dating, it's not that I don't think they can't accurately measure the amount of carbon or the parent isotope and the daughter isotope within something. That's not what I'm saying. So that's a whole nother discussion which we could talk about. But it's useful for certain things, but then when you begin to extrapolate out, far into the past, I think that you have some serious assumptions you have to deal with that bring it into question the authenticity of the dates.
Right.
And there are some really good quotes by secular historians who say that things such as there's far more evidence for the historic Jesus of Nazareth than there is for Julius Caesar, for other major figures of history.
Certainly.
There's far more concrete evidence.
Yeah, in the sense that maybe this character that was written about it existed, but the claims that are made, obviously, this brings it to a completely different question. Is this a divine character that performed miracles that
Right.
bended the laws of nature as we know them and as we experience them in the reality that we
You're right.
can test and observe?
Yeah.
Absolutely, they're two separate issues.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, if I were to only look at this book as I do and decide, put faith that a Jesus character existed as a Shakespeare existed and wrote the plays that he did.
Yeah, so we would first have to examine the text and decide, has this text been changed? did Jesus exist, and then move on to evaluating the record of him, and
Right.
did he really do these things, and yeah.
Right. Now, because the Red Sea exists, as I believe you mentioned, and a couple of other places that we know of exist or existed that are mentioned in the Bible, therefore it is your position that the miracle claims that are in the Bible did happen, like water to wine, for instance.
I think you got to take it one step at a time.
Certainly.
You have to establish first that there is a historical Jesus of Nazareth, and then you have to look at other kinds of evidence
Right.
and go step by step. You can't, you don't automatically leap to the.
How do you get to, he probably bent the laws of nature and changed water into wine, as a magician pretends to?
Well, if he is the God who he claimed to be, then the problem is erased.
Well, okay, I guess that's my question. How do you get to the point that you
Okay.
believe that he is the God he claims to be?
Where do you make the leap?
Right. Where is the leap made?
Yeah.
I don't think it's a leap. I think it's a rational thinking through of it, people went to their death by the hundreds, thousands, believing that this Jesus Christ was real.
Same for Allah.
Yeah, I would say
Yeah.
that.
Well,
yeah,
just
go
a
ahead.
moment.
Yeah.
And thousands of others.
Yeah.
Allah and the other religious teachings, back to the religious ideas, they are teachings of a man. The Quran is the teachings of Muhammad. The Bhagavad Gita is the teachings of, I forget who.
Hare Krishna.
Maybe, yeah. But the gospel accounts
Hare
are claims that are claimed to be historical. They're claimed to be history. And in the areas where I can test them, they come shining through. They come, and so I have to ask myself, is it even conceivable that maybe the miracles are true also?
In which areas that you can test them?
In archaeology, it's brilliant.
Except for Noah's Ark and
Well,
the flood, the deluge.
well,
that can't be
first-
tested apparently.
No,
'Cause
no,
you have
that's
two
not true. No,
hypotheses
no,
that
no.
require miracles.
No.
I just want to get. I
I never got to the ark.
You got a third one.
No,
That's right.
not the fish, but the ark itself. There's no guarantee given in Scripture or anywhere else that a boat at 17,000 feet plus elevation is going to endure any survival
Right.
over those centuries. So I think you have to inject a little reason here. Is it reasonable to expect that the ark would necessarily survive if it really was a historical book? No, I don't think you can say that.
Yeah. But you have to understand that we all have a certain amount of faith we have to place. I mean, even as an atheist or an evolutionist, you 4.6 billion years ago, the Earth formed. Okay, now this is a pretty amazing planet. I mean, we all know it. It's crazy. You look at science. And,
I love it.
Yeah, you're blown away. I mean, there's all kinds of weird things about our planet. Look at the moon and the fact that it happens to be exactly in the right place to create a solar eclipse. What are the chances of that? You have 91 moons in our solar system. Not a single other one is the right shape or the right distance from its planet and the right size. I mean,
I think we can
what a
all agree that
coincidence.
there's two ways of looking at things. I mean, we could shoot a picture and right now, and we could say, what are the chances that pen would have happened to be right there, in front of my eyes or in front of my nose or in front of my teeth to block that? It's amazing. After the fact, looking at it, I like it. It was pretty cool. It was pretty nifty. It made a fun picture. But saying that it had to be there to begin with, that it was put there for that reason, that everything was put in line for that reason is something different. Now, obviously, as we look at evolution, we find that we have evolved, even microevolution, we evolved to adapt to certain environments. Now, that's different than the environment being there for us, the environment adapting to us. I mean, what you're mentioning as far as the moon being there and how perfect is that? It's perfect. I love it. I love astronomy. I love the pictures we can get out of it, all the information that we can get because of that wonderful solar eclipse. However, it doesn't have to be. I mean, we love it, but that's not a sign of anything necessarily. You can look at it and say,
Well-
how, you know,
Gets your attention, though.
But I'm saying, well, I
a
guess
lot of
what I'm...
things do, but it doesn't mean that,
Right.
it doesn't mean it's a miracle.
The
We're
comparison
not
I'm-
saying
Or
the truth.
necessary.
Yeah,
No,
the
we're not-
comparison I'm
yeah.
making here is
Yeah.
that you're saying that, hey, by faith you believe that Noah's Ark happened, but,
You just said that.
oh, I'm sorry, okay, well, you had a problem with us saying that Noah's Ark was real, that it wasn't provable by evidence.
No, you said that everything that you look at in the Bible does show you that's testable and it comes through with shining colors. But we also mentioned that you cannot test.
No, that's
and
not-
you have.
That's not what we said.
Oh, I apologize. Repeat
Not
it.
everything in the Bible is something that I can, historical evidence, you can't prove 100% no matter
Right.
what.
That's right.
There's no law case, like a murder, you can't prove that scientifically. It's not repeatable, it's not observable, it's not measurable, you can't do it.
Well, it's filmable.
Well, even that is not the original event. So what I'm saying is that for all of us, atheists included, there's a certain amount of faith that has to be taken in your, I know you don't like that, but
No. I just want to make a distinction because if it happens to be that the two of you and your friends at ICR, the Institute of Creation Research,
Yeah.
can effectively disprove evolution, or better yet, come up with another system that explains all of the life that we see on Earth, the diversity of life and the connections that we see between it. If you can come up with a different process that matches better, that explains it better, and find evidence for that and prove it, and so we discard evolution, that doesn't shake my faith. That doesn't change anything about who I am. I mean, I don't require evolution to not believe in the Bible. Now, I understand, as you pointed out at the beginning, if evolution and a 4.6 billion years old Earth and so on and so forth is true, then you do have a problem with Adam and Eve, the fall, and therefore why Jesus. If you're not taking any of that literally, then Jesus is not necessary, and we could just throw out the whole second part of the book. That I get. If evolution is true, and the age of the Earth and the age of the universe is true, that is a problem for your faith, for the theology that comes out of this book here. But for me, it doesn't mean a thing. I mean,
whether evolution is true or not does not matter
no.
to you?
Oh, I study it. I'm a huge nerd. I love science. I work in biotechnology. I love it.
Sure.
I love looking at all of it. But it doesn't change my worldview in the sense that, I mean, my morals are not going to change
I have
if
to
evolution
interrupt
is
you.
not true.
We've only got about 5 more minutes of
Okay,
tape,
yeah.
so we're going to have to wind things up here fairly abruptly. I think what Sean is saying is that we're talking about completely separate things. We're talking about a faith in a God versus the various other things that you've said that you believe, like that the Earth is and you get those beliefs from the book that informs your faith.
Okay.
So you're getting the Young-Earth idea from the book that informs your faith. We would label that as religious. That might be a semantic issue, but that's what we would label as religious. To us, if somebody disproves evolution and does so in a way that gives us a lot of evidence, we will discard evolution overnight. Our identity is not tied to evolution. Our identity is tied to the reality that we see in the world.
Would you say that your identity is tied, so would you say that you have your identity is tied to atheism?
No.
No, it doesn't explain anything. That's just
atheism is nothing more than a non-belief.
I've not been
a
provided
positive
enough
assertion.
reason or evidence to believe
Yeah.
that the miracles required or stated
Let's
in
be
here.
very, very clear. I want to get it on
True.
tape
Sure.
while we still have tape.
Sure.
Atheism is not a philosophy. It's not a belief. It's a very specific non-belief. So when you say I'm an atheist, you have to clarify that and say which of the 20,000 plus gods that have been projected in the world that you're talking about. I'm also a non-theist, which means I don't have a belief in any of them. And I'm also agnostic in the sense that you can't know for sure about a potential intelligence in the universe. I would say that there's no evidence for it. I would say that I don't believe it's probably true. But I think that I have to be agnostic about it because there's no way to prove or disprove it. I think that the God of the Bible, of the God of the Quran, and the various other gods that I've ever studied and looked at are demonstrably false. And but regardless of which, I would say that, like Sean is trying to say, we're not tied to any of those. We are interested in what's true, in the preponderance of evidence, and we are interested in, and if that changes, we will change with it. We're not tied to any of those things in any way. I think we're just about out of time. Do we have a couple more minutes? 4 more minutes? Okay, so
If you guys can please.
yeah, if you guys would like to wrap it up.
I would like to just say that, you know, you come to a faith position by, I'll read about things in here that are testable, and I'll say, oh, there's agreement there. That leads me a little more in confidence that there may be some truth here. And that caused me to investigate further. And I see other things that are more consistent, and I investigate further and further. And then I hit the point where Jesus performs miracles, and I say, well, do I have a basis for discounting the possibility of this? I say I don't, you know. And so that's how it works for me. You know?
Okay.
It is a step of faith ultimately,
Right.
Yeah.
but it's not the big leap. It's a reasoned process, and then ultimately,
As you see it.
Yeah, and
As I see it,
and
yeah,
I
correct,
agree
yeah.
with what you said too, actually. I'm not tied to this book as in, this was what I was talking about, dogmatism.
Right.
I'm not tied to this book for any other reason than that I consider it to be the most plausible explanation based upon what I've seen. I think the biggest difference between you and I is probably based on, and this is why I find it so important to talk to people like yourself, is probably what we know. It's not that you're rational and I'm irrationally tied to a book. It's that I've looked into things that you haven't, and you've looked into things that I haven't. And so that being the case,
1 minute.
okay, so that being the case, somehow we've come to different conclusions. But I am completely open to hearing everything that you have to say as to why you hold the position you do.
Well, then I would love to actually have you ask us some questions next time. And we would be happy to go into that because there is a preponderance of evidence. And I'll give Sean the last minute.
Thank you for joining us on our very first episode of Make Me a Believer. And thank you, gentlemen, for coming here. And as you said, we'd like to invite you back. At this point, we're gonna be doing a monthly broadcast and meet with different types of faiths and see if they can make us a believer.
Okay.
So
Good.
we'll have you back. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank
Thanks.
you.